TikTok, there's been a new development in the saga of doing a forensics job for the DEA and DOJ on a dominant culture suburban drug dealer we'll call Katie. I'm calling her Katie because there are a lot of dominant culture female high school students and women in their 20s who are scar-facing out in the suburbs of the United States. And we have Karens. We also have Beckys. But now, as this news stories on this trend grows, I want to introduce Katie's. Now, why the DEA investigation of this particular Katie, who is operating out of the Chicago suburb of Schaumburg, Illinois, eventually tied into a larger investigation of these type of chemical manufacturing companies who are selling illicit substances through the mail to Americans on a small scale and on a large scale to the Katies of the world. The original reason that the DEA and DOJ wanted Katie's emails, and she had erased her hard drive, and then the hard drive didn't work, so she brought that hard drive to a random computer repair shop, just like our good friend Hunter Biden. By the way, the reason that he got off of all those DOJ charges is because the guy that owned that little computer shop leaked all the evidence to Fox News and all that stuff. Instead of handing it over to the DOJ, I can show you the emails from Katie because the larger case is closed, but originally the DEA did not want those emails to get the names of contacts, particularly Americans working at these chemical manufacturing companies that were manufacturing these kind of chemicals. The DEA was investigating Katie because Katie had been an addict herself at one time. And Katie was seeing a doctor in Chicago named Sarz Maxwell. And why Katie was seeing Sarz Maxwell, who opined that heroin addicts are the pleasantest, kindest people, not your kid's preschool teacher, not your grandma, heroin addicts. Dr. Sarz Maxwell was overprescribing methadone and benzodiazepines to Katie, our suburban drug dealer, so that Katie could distribute those substances on the streets of Chicago. Not only can you OD from methadone, you can fly higher than a kite if you take the methadone and benzodiazepines together. And the DEA just didn't have an indication that Sarz Maxwell was doing this. She ran a methadone clinic in Chicago and was overprescribing the methadone so that clients could resell it on the street, along with Xanax and benzodiazepines. She was overprescribing to them. You know, this whole national policy of let's let people do drugs in the Starbucks bathroom, or outside my house where they pass out, or in my kid's playground. She, Dr. Sarz Maxwell, came up with that policy, which she called harm reduction. It's not real harm reduction. Real harm reduction is not making an addict go cold turkey, but under the care of a doctor, slowly helping them titrate off a substance. Dr. Sarz Maxwell's version of harm reduction is let's just let people do drugs in the Starbucks bathroom. The DEA had seen the consequences of what Dr. Sarz Maxwell was doing with an addiction epidemic that came out of Chicago's suburbs, where her patient, Scarface Katie, was dealing benzodiazepines, methadone, and flakka, and bath salts. The DEA wanted to go after Sarz Maxwell because they thought that her idea going national was going to be really bad for the country. And oh, look what happened. If you've ever heard the idea of addiction being an alternative anti-capitalist lifestyle, that's Dr. Sarz Maxwell's idea. Well, as it turns out, when the DEA and the DOJ were investigating Dr. Sarz Maxwell, she took off for New Zealand and got a job as an outpatient counselor there in New Zealand. Well, one of her patients went to an inpatient unit with thoughts of harming himself. But the nurses who did the intake at the inpatient unit could barely understand him. He was incoherent, all sorts of other problems, so they just let him go to sleep. And while he was sleeping, he went over the Rainbow Bridge. And of course, when someone does that in an inpatient ward, that's really serious. And of course, they found out that he had OD'd from methadone and benzodiazepines, and that's a really weird combination. So they tried to get his prescription record, because as you probably know, benzodiazepines are highly controlled. Sarz Maxwell would not give them the prescription record, so they got an inquest. And oh look, he was being prescribed triple the recommended limit of methadone. Her patient who went over the Rainbow Bridge in an inpatient unit. And on top of that, the inquest and authorities in New Zealand, as well as the National Association of Opioid Treatment Providers, found out that Dr. Sarz Maxwell was also prescribing high rates of benzodiazepines. Now, Katie found out that I was the person who was approached by the DEA and DOJ to do the forensics job on a computer she dropped off to get fixed because she had tried to unerase the hard drive. She tried to erase the hard drive, and after she erased the hard drive, the computer didn't work. Sound familiar? And I was instructed to do forensics and fix and unerase the hard drive, which meant then to see if it worked, I could get all the emails from Katie and give them to the DOJ. And these were the emails where she was purchasing stuff through the mail from places like this and then distributing it on the streets of Chicago through Samuel Garcia, son of Congressman Jesus Garcia. Samuel Garcia is a member of a fine organization called the 2-6 Gangster Disciples. It is not a fast food restaurant in Chicago. And Samuel Garcia's business partners have been arrested for this by the DOJ and have gone to prison for this. And the reason that Samuel Garcia hasn't gone to prison is because his daddy, who is a U.S. congressman, there's Congressman Jesus Garcia with AOC and other Democrats getting yelled at by New Yorkers outside of the Roosevelt Hotel, where many of the migrants are staying, also staying on the streets outside. Jesus Garcia used his influence as a congressperson to get a $100 million contract for a law firm in Chicago with the government of Cook County, Illinois. And in exchange, that law firm has kept his son out of jail by providing a free lawyer for his criminal cases. Interestingly enough, Katie's best friend is also a fundraiser for Congressman Garcia. Isn't that interesting? And Chicago police were also working with Katie, so they let her know I was the person who did the DEA forensics job, and I went through a little bit of hell. I cannot go around saying that a doctor was her main supplier and that I had originally done that case because the DEA was looking at that doctor for overprescribing methadone and benzodiazepines, which together can be used like other illicit substances to fly like a kite. But now I can, because she did that in another country. Here's another interesting thing about Dr. Sarz Maxwell moving to New Zealand. She writes Hobbit erotica. Yes, Hobbit erotica. So not only did she go to New Zealand to flee the feds, she probably also went to New Zealand to get her Peter Jackson stan on. And now I'm also vindicated when I say Sarz Maxwell is a horrible human being. And this drug-dealing Becky sure did put some raisins in my potato salad. I know this story was my life, not a Quan Millz book. It could be because Katie was also an aspiring rapper. That was also how the DEA got evidence. But we'll save that Becky put raisins in the potato salad story of my life, part of the story, for another TikTok.